Great Chef Challenge, where kids come and they have to travel the world to find the ingredients to a particular meal they're going to eat with us that day. And it's a lot of fun, but actually the amount of things they learn just in that journey of going to find the ingredients around our biomes is terrific. And we also do this thing called Don't Forget Your Leech Socks, where they have to pretend they're going on an Amazon expedition, and they go into a room and have got to choose X weight of stuff that they're allowed to carry with them for a week in the jungle, and identify various plants that were good for them and bad for them, and then they go into the biomes and do it. And they just love it. We've now extended that into the British countryside, because it's something rather ridiculous of getting them familiar with the jungle and not doing it on Dartmoor or whatever. Yeah. But I think people... My favourite saying is one by C.S. Lewis, who says that while science may lead you towards truth, only the imagination can lead you towards meaning. And I think it's in the imagination that we're not perhaps serving our children as well as we could, because I think formal learning is terrific in terms of putting a whole lot of stuff there, but you also need space to dream, and dreaming is actually really, really important, and people often think that it's not useful time to play. You know, we did something at Eden which really moved me and has really influenced me a lot. I wrote a story called The Alien in the Orchard, which was premised on an alien arriving in my orchard and giving me a gift, because I saved its life, a pill that I could give to everyone on Earth that would have the talents in it that would enable everybody on Earth to search for that which they call happiness. Yes. And I had 3,000 letters to me about people telling me what should be in those pills. Gosh. And that really shook me, because number one was people felt you ought to know where you sit in nature instead of humankind. Number two, your mind and your body, you should know as much about it as possible. And the third thing, this is almost unanimous amongst all 3,000, was that you should be able to put yourself in the shoes of another. There are lots of ways of phrasing that. But after that, what really was amazing, people thought you ought to be able to dance and to sing and to express yourself with your hands through painting or drawing, whatever. For that many people to realise it's fundamental, it's not an adjunct, it's something about your own language, how you speak about yourself, I think it's something we really need to look at, because...
And to some extent, you're bringing two things which are often seen as contradictory together. You're talking about the importance of skills and experiences like that, and a little while back you mentioned about teaching science, and we don't teach science very well, we don't get enough science teachers, and it's an area of great worry. To some extent, that's a curriculum area where we are least likely to use those things you've just been talking about. Is that part of the problem, that somehow we've got a curriculum in a world in which we split the aesthetic from science as though they're completely separate things?
Yes, because when we start, after you know, the period that I'm sure you love too, there's Huxley, Lyell, Darwin, where the world was what you studied, and science was actually the observation of natural phenomena. And there was a delight in it, wasn't there? But as soon as it became...
A discovery, yeah.
Yeah, but as soon as it was divided into ologies and things, you know, this isn't a novel thought on my part, many people have said this, it kind of almost sterilised the interest, because you didn't see the whole thing as being related to you. It's like storytelling is fantastically important, and I wonder whether part of the science curriculum ought to... Because we have a lot of science postgrads come to Eden, and we put them for a week with our theatre group before they're allowed on site. And what we say to the PhD students is, once you've gone through this week, you have to now explain to children why what you're researching is important. And they find it absolutely riveting. But you see, if you put scientists around a campfire with a drink in their hands and say, now, tell us the story of why it's interesting. Start with a story as if we're all 6 years old. It's fascinating. But most people don't have that gift of being able to build up a story.
It's the narrative of life, isn't it, to some extent? Yeah. What feedback do you get from teachers and students? I mean, you know, how do you measure your own impact or your own success at Eden? And I think one thing that interests me, once they've gone back to school, are they able to keep in touch with you? So are you beginning something that carries on once they're away from you?
Yeah, we do. There is a network of the schools that have been to us. We have, I think, 37,000 children come a year.
That's a lot, of primary and secondary, right the way through the age ranges.
And we try to be as supportive as we can, but part of what Eden is about them taking what they like from us and then developing their own stuff. Because they know what to do. Teachers know what to do with their own pupils, because you know they're not systems; these are real flesh and blood. But what they like is just having a touchstone for this is. Can you see how this can be improved? And we love that kind of relationship.
And to some extent, they're new challenges. I often think that teachers must feel that pressure every time there's a national or world crisis. Solving it somehow placed on their shoulders about educating the next generation. So, is there an element of that when they see you dealing with some of these very complex issues, and some extent gives them confidence to take them on with children?
Well, I think
broaden their horizons, I think.
The broadening of horizons, yes, but also the bravery to say no. Because what happens, if you take global warming, it's becoming like a new religion, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's taking place, no one denies that, but the passion with which everybody's embraced it, being the crisis, is quite interesting, because it's as if everybody has a vested interest in it now being so that everybody changes in the same way so no one gets an advantage. There's a kind of strange hidden tech. If I were to say to you, global warming is one of 20 things which are just as likely to do for us, whether it be huge epidemics, whether it be the problem of an aging population, equity issues. Teachers can't teach all those things. What they can be brilliant at is getting people to just ask, what is fair? What is fair, without politics at all? What is fair? How do you run a society? Because personally, I think the biggest battleground isn't global warming, and the dealing with global warming is actually an adjunct of us learning how to create healthy communities again, in the true sense of communities. Because many people don't seem to understand that a community, it comes from the words communos, together in gift. It's not about a geography of people. And if we could create moments where groups of people understand how uplifting it is to collaborate and do things, as opposed...
Yeah, not necessarily be in the same geographical area.
But I mean, our country is not actually very healthy, but people want it to be healthy. And I think we're not telling stories that make Britain today come alive for the people who live here. We're telling too many stories of the past, and we need to be telling stories about those of us who are here and the great future we can have together, and also why we should actually be on the same side. I mean, I think the most influential thing I ever seen in my life was a big rock concert in Rotterdam. 10 Hells Angels terrorized 10,000 people. I remember thinking then, what happened to the good guys get organised?
Yes,
and I think it's time for the good guys to get organised.
Right, yeah. One of the things I've read about when I was reading about some of the things you said, there's often a feeling now it's this notion of community. That's what I want to get at, because there's some people who seem to think that the only way we'll get community back is if we get rid of a lot of technology and travel and moving away and living away from where you work. You don't think that. I mean, from what you've just said about your description of community, you think somehow there is a way to bring forward the traditional benefits of community, but with all the benefits of modern living and technology and the rest of it. I think this is something that's really important. I'm sure will be a huge challenge for today's children when they become adults. That how do we recapture something that is the essence of community in the world in which we live?
Well, I think like most good things, the complex hides in the simple. I would start by trying to make everybody who lives on every street in Britain meet everybody who lives on their street.
Even their next door neighbour.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to a conference recently about innovation, and I was really aggressive because they wanted me to be contentious, and I said, milk. Let's talk about milk. Let's talk about Tetra Pak. Let's talk about that wonderful innovation. I said, big company makes a lot of money. You get your milk slightly cheaper. I said, how many hundreds of thousands of old people now don't have a social service of the milkman?
Right.
Who costed that? You know, and no one does. And we've got to be brighter. We've got to be brighter and gentler and kinder, because I think almost everybody I've ever met is a good person, but we're just unhappily positioned. And I think social occasions, moments that make people glad to be together are just fantastically important. And we can do that. I don't think it's difficult.
Just so that we've got this right, we've talked all the time really about what you do with children of school age at Eden, but to some extent you embrace lifelong learning. You've got educational opportunities for adults, and I think you also, I mean, you're bound to take on school leavers as apprentice. You talked about your PhD students. As an employer, you're receiving if you're right, it's a horrible word, but the results of the education system. How do you find the youngsters that come to you, or the not so youngsters that come to you for jobs?
Variable.
Strengths and weaknesses?
Funnily enough, the greatest weakness is lack of confidence.
Yes.
Most children or young adults that I meet, you can get them to raise their benchmark incredibly quickly if they feel respected, trusted, and they get the right support. We find that if we employ really good people to teach them, they become really good really quickly.
And the environment, the setting in which you're doing it, the flexibility goes back to that inspiration and creativity that you've got. Have you ever been tempted to replicate the project elsewhere? Obviously, you can't represent the geography of it. But
14 different countries have approached us, and we've turned them all down because we felt that the vanity of doing it elsewhere. We're not like Disney. It's about attitude.
Yeah.
The fact that we've got
not a brand name in that sense.
No. We did say to the United Arab Emirates that if they wanted to do an Eden project, we'd do it, but they needed Arab architects, Arab engineers, Arab poets, Arab artists, Arab horticulturists, the whole lot.
Has they taken you up on that? I mean, have they done that?
They were just completely appalled because they thought, we want your Eden project. And we said, in that case, bye-bye. You don't understand.
That's the notion almost as money can buy it to some extent.
Yeah, but it's not interesting. Mr. Smith, what bank account would you like £5 million? You don't understand.
But presumably you do think if they did get all those things you said they should have, it is a replicable model.
Yes, but it's about attitude. It's about attitude. It's not about a geography of what it looks like. It's about this fusion of technology, the arts, and science, with the humanities of actually just telling great stories. They're centres to hold moments, if you like.
As we said already, there's this great national debate going on at the moment, and the turning point's been reached in people's awareness. When you look at the nature of that debate and what government is doing and the way, I suppose, in terms of political leadership, we're taking on sustainability, environmental issues, are we getting it right?
Well, as an individual, I would say no. But that is simply because I believe we've arrived at a state where those in politics have to understand the difference between being a politician and a statesman. And I think we've arrived at a point where it needs to almost be above politics, where we actually say to define our generation, we need to actually have a radical, exponential cultural change, not the small steps. Because I think to be able to meet the challenges of the next 30 years, we're going to have to really upgrade what we do with our education system to make us prepared.
To some extent, our conversation has been a mix between huge optimism about what you've been doing and the results of it and what is possible and the change in people you see, and cautious pessimism about perhaps not having got the narrative right as a nation. If I was to ask you in terms of the issues we've been addressing, are you an optimist or a pessimist? What would be your answer?
I'm 95% optimist, 5% pessimist. There's an irony about human nature, isn't there, that we only bring the best out of ourselves when we're under pressure. And I think, in a sense, maybe that's why we all embrace the idea of global warming and the catastrophe with the frisson, that we want to have a disaster that can put us all shoulder to shoulder fighting a common
a new war, new enemy.
It's a tragedy, really, that we're really asking a question: how do we, if you like, harness the spirit of war to a time of peace? Maybe rather clumsily phrased, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Because I think we all want that. It's a kind of spiritual yearning with a small s, a desire for meaning and belonging, and feeling that actually putting a roof over our heads and money isn't actually the most important thing. Actually, it's a sense of fellowship.
Well, 95.5 aren't bad odds, so thank you. Tim Smith, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.